Good afternoon. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero, and welcome to another edition of Point of View. As your host, we're talking about my point of view, of course, and what we're talking about here today is the politics of morality versus the common good. So in order for us to get there, we have to define what is the common good, because we have two issues playing here that affect all of our lives, especially this time of year when we're talking about campaigning, politicians, and issues. You see, here are examples of the common good. Everyone will agree that infrastructure is good. You see, common good are issues that affect everybody. Things like infrastructure, roads, buildings, school buildings, public safety, that's very important. Crime rates, those affect everybody. Public health affects everybody. Public education affects everybody. So when we look at laws, we want to look at laws that our senators and politicians are passing that are for the common good, for the benefit of everybody. Let's go to full screen on this one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some laws that are still in the books today that reflect the difference between morality law and common law. For example, it's illegal today in 2022 to eat more than 3 sandwiches at a wake in the state of Massachusetts. It is illegal to whistle underwater in West Virginia. It is illegal to drive black cars on Sunday in Denver, Colorado. It is illegal to hunt ducks while riding a mule in Kansas. It is illegal to still have your Christmas decorations up after January 14th in Maine. Now, these are generic examples of morality laws that really are morality laws and not for the common good. So let's look at some more. It's illegal for a woman to parachute on Sunday in Florida. It is illegal for women to wear pants in Tucson, Arizona. It's illegal for a married woman must present written permission from her husband before getting a haircut in Michigan. And it is illegal for women to get false teeth without permission from her husband, written permission from her husband, or from her parent if she's unmarried in the state of Virginia. And with Bill 291 sitting here at the legislature right now, Guam's newest morality law is going to be bounty hunters can sue anyone on Guam they believe has gotten involved in women's health issues here on Guam. So that's an example of personal morality laws versus common good morality laws. And these are things that we need to take a very close look at because our nation, our country, sucks when it comes to enforcing morality. All we have to do is look back at the 1900s when alcohol was illegal. And today it's not. Marijuana was illegal. Yet today I believe it's it's legal now in 26 states in one form or another, and there's legislation that if it all passes will make it legal in 41 states. And recently, there has been a movement to pass laws taxing sugared foods and sugared drinks. Now think about that one for a second. Remember, for the past 40 years, we've been told that cholesterol is bad for us. And then a funny thing happened. People started looking at the data behind all these things, and this is one of my personal heroes. His name is W. Edwards Deming. He was a statistician who helped bring the Japanese economy out of the dark ages after World War II, and working with the Japanese industries, he took Japan from a third world nation to the #2 economy in 40 years. And his philosophy was, in God we trust, everyone else must bring data. And what happened when we looked at the data? Well, the first thing that happened, that in the space of 20 years, we went from cholesterol is bad to now cholesterol is good. So, what is the data telling us about Bill 291? Let's go to full screen on this one. When we look at Bill 291, we learn something really interesting, that for the years 2008 to 2017, there were an average of 32 abortions performed on Guam a year. In 2018, we had 41. 2019, we had 0. And that was because the practitioner retired. In 2020, we had 0. And in 2021, we had 6. Back to me. So what we're looking at here is, this is a solution looking for a problem. When we consider how much time and energy that we are spending on this Bill 291, we are overlooking the fact that two things have worked. Education and modern birth control have dramatically reduced the number of abortions being performed on this island. So instead of putting all this time and energy and money and effort into solving a moral dilemma, we should be focusing our time and energy on solving real problems. Because this abortion issue is a distraction from a bigger problem, and that bigger problem is absent fathers. You see, in America, we have a crisis of absent fathers, and we have a lot of issues here with absent fathers based on testimony I've heard over the years when Public Health and Social Services, Child Protective Services comes forward. When fathers are absent in the family, the children are 4 times greater chance of living in poverty, 2 times greater chance of infant mortality, and more likely to become pregnant as teenagers than when the fathers are present in the family. They're more likely to abuse drugs, and they're more likely to have behavioral problems, and they're 2 times more likely to suffer from obesity, and they're more likely to go to prison, and they're more likely to face abuse and neglect, and they're more likely to commit crimes. We need to pay attention to that, because what we're looking at here is that more than half of child abuse cases have gone unreported while the schools were closed. And that's a serious problem that we're facing here. And when we look at statistics that have been put out by the Department of Health and Human Services of the federal government, and we're looking at the state of family quality here on Guam, we learn that a number of things. 23% of all households on Guam are below the poverty rate. 44% of married households, 44% of those 23 are married households below the poverty rate. But here's the most alarming statistic. 56% of those households, single-parent families, are female, and 24% have the male parent. So that's important. We have to look at this fact and why this is important, instead of trying to solve the morality issue, because at the end of the day, the decision whether or not to get an abortion does not affect everybody. It affects a family. It affects a father, it affects a mother, and it affects an extended family. But when we consider all the other problems facing Guam, This, while a family tragedy, is not a societal tragedy. But here is a societal tragedy. 1 in 5 children in the year 2020 goes to bed hungry. And the cost of raising children, based on 2013 numbers, is just shooting through the roof. For a single parent, it was $225,000 to raise a child from birth to age 18. And for a family unit, it's $233,000 to raise a child from birth to 18. But when we factor in inflation into those numbers just got higher, and this is just bringing it up to 2020. $279,000 for a single parent, $289,000 for a family. I bring this up because when we look at what the real problems facing the families are right now, and the fact that the number of abortions being performed on this island is so low, tells me one thing, that this bill 291, oh, I forgot this part right here. Yeah, the cost of raising a child is just the bare minimum. It does not include special gifts, or if your child gets ill, or the cost of any additional education, like if you want your children to go to college. Which brings me back to this point right here. 3.7 million more children got pushed into poverty with the expiration of the child investment tax credit. So now 41% increase in the number of children who are going to bed in poverty every night. Proving more that abortion is just a distraction from another bigger problem, and that is the declining health of all of our people. Now, while abortion is a family tragedy, the declining health of our people is a societal tragedy, because when we look at the fact that better than 90% of the deaths that were related to COVID also had underlying comorbidities. And yet, instead of trying to do something to reduce the incidence of diabetes in our community, which has been an underlying condition in almost most of the COVID deaths we've suffered, we're not. And this is why I'm concerned about that. I spent a good 10 years working with the Guam Non-Communicable Disease Consortium. It's a group of citizens, medical professionals, community advocates, leaders in our community that are very concerned about the deterioration of the health of our people. And in 2015, the Ajuda Foundation did a survey and discovered that between 2010 and 2015, strokes were up 83%, diabetes up 78%, heart disease up 42%, and cancer up 10%. That was a survey done 7 years ago. I can only imagine what those numbers look like today, because while very rarely are we seeing a family being impacted by an abortion situation, just about every family on this island has people affected with stroke, diabetes, heart disease, or cancer. In my own family, our entire senior generation died of complications of diabetes. So if we had put as much time and effort on focusing on those issues as we do on Bill 291, we actually might be doing something that will make our society as a whole better, and here's why. Recent information has shown us that the first generation of children who will not live a longer life or a healthier life than their parents has been born. We see here on Guam, I was real upset when I learned that we are already seeing children in their, as young as 10 years old having heart attacks. We see a large number of children on diabetes medication. Now remember, diabetes up until the last 20 years used to be referred to as the old age disease, because most people never got diabetes until they were much older, and their lifestyles had become more sedentary, and they were wealthier, and they were eating a lot of things that they probably shouldn't have. But now we're looking at a generation of children coming into this world, and if I remember the Department of Public Health statistics, I think it was 2015 when they did the body mass index on the entire student body, we had like 30% of our children were overweight, with 18% of them obese. This is a bigger problem than the very small number of medical abortions we see taking place here on Guam. And another alarming statistic has just happened. In the year 2020, more children died in the United States as a result of gun violence than died in automobile accidents. So we are seeing a bigger problem that is rapidly overshadowing Bill 291. If we can't take care and keep the children here who are safe here, we should be focusing on that, so that when children do come to us and do come into this world, we can give them a better quality of life than we are seeing them have right now. Just recent examples taking place show us how critical this can be. As we go back to our situation here in Texas, where a gunman walked into a school and killed 19 students and 2 adults. And I wish I could say this was a rarity, but I saw information recently that said that in the past year, we have had 289 mass shootings here in the United States. Now, not all of them are at schools, but still, the fact that there's now people talking about turning our schools, giving our schools the kind of security systems that we normally talk about giving prisons. Only this time the security systems, instead of trying to keep criminals in, are trying to keep criminals out. There's something wrong with this picture right here. Because every day, 12 children in America die from gun violence. And 68% of the guns used in gun-related incidents at schools are guns that were bought for protection. They were taken from the home or from a family or a friend. So we have a bigger problem here. There are some politicians who would like you to believe that abortions are the reason we have gun violence. And that's called political grandstanding. And that's what I'm calling on the sponsors of Bill 291. They're using an emotional topic to improve their chances at re-election. And that's why I'm very upset about this topic, because we elected them to represent all of us. And we hope that they would be introducing and passing laws that would benefit all of us. But when we get to that divide we were talking about earlier, the difference between morality laws and common good laws, why is personal choice okay for guns? Why is personal choice okay for drugs? Why is personal choice okay for gambling? And why is personal choice okay for sugar drinks and candy and other metabolic damaging products? Why is personal choice okay for prostitution? And why is personal choice not okay for face mask, or vaccines, or abortion. Bill 291 shows politicians at their worst. And all you have to do to realize that this was not serious legislation, because this bill does absolutely nothing to ban abortion. What this bill does, in the words of the sponsors of this bill, is turn enforcement of abortion over to the mob, these guys. Yeah, that's what Bill 291 does, because Bill 291 specifically prohibits any government official, any government employee, any government agency from enforcing a ban on abortions, but allowing private citizens to inflict financial harm on anybody they believe has performed or aided in an abortion. If this policy by these people had merit, why don't they do the same thing for drug dealers? Why don't they make it possible for the citizens of Guam to walk around and hunt down all those guys standing on street corners, out by schools and parking lots selling drugs, and let the mob, let the citizens of Guam inflict justice, the way they're asking the mob to police abortion here on Guam. And that's really, really so frustrating when you consider how few people have abortions in the first place, because our education system has done a good job at preparing young men and women to avoid those situations, to the point where it is rare. But what won't be rare is if we go ahead and pass this law and allow anybody who wants to count coup and get that $10,000 reward for turning somebody in. You know, this kind of reminds me of that bill the governor tried to pass at the beginning of the pandemic, where she wanted people able to turn in people that were congregating more than 10 to their home, or not wearing masks in public, and they could. Well, we were lucky that didn't pass, and I predict the same thing is not going to happen on this bill right here. This is not going to pass, because the damage to society, the common good, would be too great when you have guys running around with the power and ability to enforce abortions. And it gets even worse, because it puts a bullseye on medical practitioners, medical technicians, people we're trying to lure to the community. So we're putting people at risk who try to provide health care services to the women in our community. And that is just wrong. And what is more wrong is this bill makes it possible for people to count coup on anybody they think may have aided or facilitated the process of an abortion, from insurance clerks who process paperwork to cashiers in stores who sold somebody some aspirin on if that community vigilante believes that that person is taking aspirin to help them deal with the pain and body aches that came after a procedure. But ultimately, this bill is aimed at taxpayers, because as we have seen in many cases here in Guam, when politicians get things wrong, it is the taxpayers who pay. And just imagine the liability we're opening taxpayers up to when a doctor who performs an abortion gets sued and wins against the taxpayers of Guam who allowed this bill to take place. So this bill does absolutely nothing to stop abortions here on Guam, because anybody that has the price of a plane ticket will be able to travel anywhere in the world where abortions can be performed safely and legally, just not here on Guam. That's why we need to go back to the data. And the data says that there are 2.2 live births here on Guam. So what we need to do is rethink this whole abortion issue. Yeah, let's rethink this for a second. Because there are two parties to an abortion. There's the mother and the father. And since we know that, based on data, there's only going to be 2 times a year a man wants to have a child, maybe what we should be doing is requiring, like a lawmaker in Oklahoma is proposing, mandatory vasectomies on young men at the age of 16, and they can reverse them when the young man and his significant other or wife want to have a child. Then they can have the vasectomy reversed. It's safer for the husband or the father, it's safer for the woman than the current rules that are being proposed under Bill 291. This is where I regret the fact that we have lost civics as a mandatory course in our school system, because it was in civics class in junior high school and high school here in Guam that I learned about the common good. I learned about government. I learned about how we as a democracy are supposed to look after each other, and how looking after all of us is the priority over looking a few of us. There are for people out there who believe that abortion is morally wrong, they have a choice. They cannot have one. But for those who feel that due to circumstances, that personal circumstances, that an abortion is something that they may want to consider, that is their choice. It is not my choice to tell you you shouldn't drink soda because soda is going to give you diabetes. You shouldn't smoke cigarettes because cigarettes is going to give you cancer. Then why is it possible that I can tell a woman that she can't have an abortion? We either have to do it all or do none of it. If you're not willing to say no to drugs, no to guns, no to sugar drinks, no to alcohol, and no to tobacco, you can't say no to abortion. That's discriminating against the rights of women to make a decision that they believe is in their best interest. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero. This is my point of view. And in closing, I want to say I have talked with a lot of women over the years who've had abortions, and it is not a decision that any of them made lightly. And it is a decision that affected all of them. So, in one case, and I highlighted in the post copy, I know a young woman who had an abortion as a teenager, knowing that as a teenager she didn't have the financial ability or the family support or the wherewithal to be a single mom at that time. And she was a much better mom having waited until she was graduated from school, older, more settled, and in a stable relationship and stable financially. I also know women who had children when they were very, very young and feel they've been condemned to a life of poverty. So that's why these decisions are moral decisions best made by the person whose life it affects most, and not the mob. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero, and this is my point of view.